So we have our first panel taking the stage. As already previewed, the discussion here, local to urban connection, city to county connection, the Akron, Ohio story. So Tony, take it away. Thanks.
Well, thank you, David. We're honored to join with all of our colleagues this morning at the 3rd Annual Housing and Education Summit. And I know many in the audience are doing similar work to us, and you could all be up here telling, I think, an equally compelling story. But for Akron, we've been asked to present on a local model of success that I think as you hear the speakers, you will see that it's evolved over a period of time, largely due to the leadership and vision of elected officials, school superintendents, the housing authority, and many other partners. I've been director of the Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority for 24 years. I've been on the CLPHA board for probably half of that time or a little bit longer. And I've seen how the industry has evolved when we first started talking about systems alignment, health, education, elderly services, et cetera, several years ago. And well, I think we were maybe on the cutting edge in Akron with some things we did about 10 years ago. I'm just blown away by all the success that we've seen around the country, so that now when we come to conferences like this, we always go back with 5 or 10 good ideas. So we thank you for all of your efforts. So how do you make a difference? I think that's probably the most perplexing question I've faced as executive director in 24 years. We're all buried with administrative minutiae, regulations, lawsuits sometimes, regulatory changes, budgetary problems, et cetera. David James, our school superintendent, and I were talking this morning before the program started about how difficult it is not only to build community partnerships, but how time-consuming it is. And sometimes the good problem is you have many people seeking to partner with you, but how do you manage that process, and how do you resource that process in an effective and efficient manner? And I think that's really the big challenge that sometimes keeps us awake. The other is just simply the scale. So when I say how do we make a difference, probably starting around 2005, 2006, I realized that we were doing many services in Akron, and while we were doing them well, and we had many community partnerships, they were pretty scattered. So we really started to look at data and a stronger focus on outcomes in terms of how we channel those resources. And it goes without saying that early childhood education, which is a good part of what we'll be talking about this morning, is a topic that we at least centered on. All education is important, but as we looked at our needs locally in Akron and the County of Summit area, we thought that the place that we could make the most significant difference was improving early childhood education services for children living in public housing. I think education and housing have a natural bond, though it may be difficult sometimes to facilitate and act on that bond. If you really look at both programs, we're both public entities. We certainly both have far too many critics, too little funding, ever-increasing service demands, and we've often been faced with failed leadership at the state and federal level when it comes to not only budgetary commitment, but just consistent policy directives and patience to actually let new initiatives work. So I think, as several speakers have already mentioned today, the solution really has to be at the local level as we weather these very difficult times. So as we look at partnership this morning, we're going to follow the order at the table, but just for introductory purposes, since we're talking about education, I'll talk about David James first. David James has been with the Akron Public School System for about 25 years. And his hallmark really is partnership, not just in working with the Housing Authority, but working with a wide assortment of community partners. That's really what he's known for. I think the trait I admire most in him is that he likes to get things done. He does not like to spend a lot of time studying things. He wants to be analytical, and he wants to be factually based, but he really wants to get down to the road, so to speak, and move things along rather than have endless discussion. So we value his pragmatism, and he's been an invaluable partner to the Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority during those 25 years. Derran Wimer is Executive Director of the Summit Education Initiative, and that is a local nonprofit in the Akron Summit County area that's focused primarily on data and research impacting education. And they do everything from help us determine standards and appropriate measurements, interpreting state and local standards, tracking results. They've come up with innovative ways for school systems, other agencies to share data so we can see what those outcomes or how we are doing in meeting the outcomes that we've set. And I know in the time that Derran Wimer has been there, it's almost perfect timing, which I can't take any credit for, but about the time that we started to really get more intensive in our approach to outcome measurements, he started as executive director at SEI after many years in educational administration. So it was perfect timing, and he probably did more than anyone in helping us shape the framework for the programs that we then undertook and continue to do today. And then third, and certainly not least, Ilene Shapiro has actually been a colleague of mine for more years than I'll mention, but we talked last night that actually back in the early 1980s we first met when she was instrumental in establishing a women's network program in the Akron Summit County area. I was director of something called the Private Industry Council at the time, and we funded a number of training initiatives that were geared towards helping women prepare to either re-enter or enter for the first time in the workforce. And she has really spent her entire adult life working not only in business as a successful entrepreneur, later working as an executive in the healthcare field. She was previously council president of our county council for county government, and about a little over a year ago became the first female to be elected county executive in the county of Summit. I will say that sadly, Summit County, by the way, is one of only 2 counties in the state of Ohio that has a charter form of government. There are 88 counties. The other 86 are all the more traditional commissioner form of government. That has been a tremendous help because both Ilene and her predecessors have, through that structure, I think been able to really influence on a far greater level policy and objectives throughout the county, particularly focused on social services and education, rather than just the day-to-day administration of county government functions. Sadly, Russ Pry, our previous county executive, Russ was actually at our first Housing Education Summit in 2015. He died way too soon last year after a very short illness, but his hallmark was certainly promoting education for all kids in our county. His efforts were instrumental in establishing something called the Family First Council. Ilene's going to talk a little bit about that this morning, but she has not only continued the work that he began, she's actually taking that to new levels. So we count greatly on her leadership in our community. Regarding AMHA services, I'll just briefly touch on a few things. Those of you who are at the workshop session yesterday have heard some of this, so I'll try to condense it. But our early child education program, again, is part of a countywide initiative, and we'll talk more about that. But basically, there are countywide standards. There's research behind everything that we do. Everyone working in Summit County on early child education is working on shared goals and shared resources. So we actually use the Parents as Teachers program as our approach to early childhood programs. That's an evidence-based practice program. And while there are many excellent programs, some of which Sonia mentioned in her introductory comments, for us, that's given us the structure to actually target our resources and measure the results, and we have been very successful in doing so. A key part of that program is home visitation, and our staff actually make regular visits to new residents when they move into public housing. They also track and monitor families who have children in the key age groups, make home visits to try to establish the relationship, to then introduce the moms and or the dads to the educational services available. Then they really act as both counselor, mentor, and facilitator to help link those families and children with the available resources throughout the community. But the home visitation model is really a key component of the Parents as Teachers program. What we found, which is no surprise to all of you, engaging residents in today's world is probably the most difficult task we face. No matter how good the program, how do you really get residents involved? How do you get them enthused? How do you get them to follow through? And for that, we have found that family outreach events, oftentimes that don't look like educational activities, are what works best. So we'll have service fairs, we'll have recreational kinds of things, we'll have things that involve food, of course, because that always brings people out. We do events like Touch a Truck, where the municipalities throughout our county assemble all of their cool pieces of equipment, police cars and fire trucks and water trucks and so on. And the kids get to climb through all those vehicles and meet the cop or meet the water department worker and honk the horn and so forth. At the same time, there are tables with food and refreshments and free things to entice people's participation. And we kind of nudge them into finding out about all the early child education services that are available, making referrals to Head Start for enrollment, et cetera. So family outreach events are something that our staff that are here have done a great job at, again, building receptibility with our residents for early child education. We found early on that maternal depression is a very serious problem with moms living in poverty in general, and certainly moms with young kids. So we have a whole initiative built around that. But in combination, the home visitation, the family outreach events, and focusing on maternal depression, some of that is actually support groups where moms can bring their kids to a central place. Babysitting services are provided, and the moms actually get to meet among themselves, discuss common problems. Sometimes other resources can be brought to bear, so if they have either mental health issues or financial issues or any other problem that's getting in the way, which there usually are many, they're actually able to share information and then act on some of those things without the interruption of kids running around and needing their attention at the moment. So what we have found in sum total is that while we started out to do early child education for the obvious good reasons that it helps prepare kids for school, which helps them be more successful in later life, what we found out is that it was really opening up a whole myriad of issues, has caused us to rethink how we deliver services across the spectrum of our public housing. And that reliance on data and outcome measurements has essentially been extended to all other services that we provide. So that's the 2-minute overview of what we're doing. And I just have to really thank our panel first and thank many of our community who have helped the Housing Authority get to this point, because we don't do this work alone. And I certainly want to acknowledge the excellent staff we have at the Akron Housing Authority for hanging in there as we go through budget cuts and staffing realignment and so forth. We've really put a high priority on continuing the work that we've started. So with that, by way of introduction, we're going to go right down the line here. Derran Wimer, Executive Director of the Summer Education Initiative, will talk about his role and the services they provide, and then we'll proceed with our other speakers. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. When Tony was speaking, it made me go back to when I was a principal of a building in which there was a housing authority facility, an Akron Housing Authority facility. And it made me think of a couple of the kids. I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying, but because I was thinking about
Not unusual.
not unusual. But I was thinking about a couple of my kids that lived in that facility, but went to my high school, and their success stories. And one girl, she had moved, if I recall correctly, she had moved 6 times in 8 years before she landed at Pinewood. Right? And when she landed at Pinewood as a 9th grader, she stayed there 4 years and graduated. She was a theater person, music and dance, and I really think that the stability of housing and being able to know that she was going to be consistently cared for and have a roof over her head led to her being successful in school. Right? It had to lead to that success. And I think of another kid who was in my office a lot, and but he also met with success. Both these kids went off to college. One, she was, Judy was her name, just found her niche and took off in theater. And then David struggled, but he still had consistent housing. He had moved to the Akron area from either Detroit or Chicago, I can't remember. And he struggled, right, to fit in initially. But eventually he started to find his niche, graduated, went to community college, and now owns a construction business. And just, you know, as you were talking, I mean, that's what we're working for, right? I mean, we're all trying to do this as educators and as housing authority people. We're trying to help young people be successful and find futures where they can, you know, feel good about themselves. Summit Education Initiative is a 501c3 that works in Akron and Greater Summit County. And we have as our goal to help students graduate prepared, passionate, and persistent so that they can work a plan to be enrolled, enlisted, or employed. We want every student, when they leave high school, to have a plan to either be enrolled in higher education, to be employed in a career, not in a dead-end job, or to enlist in public service in one way or another. And we work real hard with all the high schools to make sure that we have kids that are in one of those three paths and that they're working that plan. We want all kids in the county to be successful. So as a nonprofit, we work really hard to be Switzerland. We don't really care where the kids live, and we don't really care where they go to school. Our goal is that every student in the county, every child in the county is successful, no matter where they attend school. Now, we have a hard time reaching like the homeschool kids. But other than that, we're pretty successful in being able to reach all the other kids, whether they're in charters or non-publics or public schools. Obviously, the vast majority of students are in the public school system. In order for us as a nonprofit to do this work, we have to rely on collaboration. That's the only way we can get done, because the Summit Education Initiative is a nonprofit. We don't have any authority. No one has to listen to us. So the only way that we can influence is through data, because it's very difficult to argue with data when it's turned into some information that can be acted upon. So we have data access agreements with all the school districts in the county, many of the non-public schools, and about 80% of the early childhood providers in the county. And very purposeful about data access versus data sharing. First of all, sharing is a little scarier for people than access. And so we were purposeful about using the word access because it's just a little less intrusive feeling. Also, we at SEI do not hold any data. We only access the data that exists in all the school systems. And we do that behind the same system that the school districts all use. So we joined that system so that when we access data, it's as safe as the student data in any school, or the personnel data, or the finance data that are in the schools. That mitigates a lot of risk for us, for the school districts, for my board, because it's all behind the same firewall and protections and so on that the school districts already have. Access is also important rather than sharing, because we then don't rely on personnel in each of the schools to create spreadsheets and to do extra work for us. So we're not layering on work for the schools, and we're also not waiting for personnel in the schools to put our request above the requests of the principals and so on. We can just go in and access the data and see the data, because we have annual written permission from the superintendents to do that. And that's one of our metrics, is if the superintendents will sign that data access agreement every January. And so far, 6 years in a row, all 17 have signed it. So we feel that we're being trustworthy with the data and with supporting their work. And as soon as the superintendents, if David doesn't sign it, then I don't have a job, basically, right? It's over, because the promise would have been broken. So the data is the basis for everything that we do. So if you look at the arrow up there, that's kind of how we organize our work. And K, 3, 8, 9, and 12, we have strategy teams that meet around each of those areas. So we have a kindergarten, early childhood strategy team, and I'll focus on that in a moment. But we also have a 3rd grade literacy team, we have an 8th grade math team, we have a 9-12 we combined as what we call the Ready High School Network team, and then we have a college attainment team. Those teams are made up of cross-sector members from the community. So on our early childhood team, we have 25 people on that team. We have a member of county council on the team, Akron Public Schools teachers on the team, AMHA Early Childhood Initiative personnel on that team, other preschools, Head Start people, philanthropy is on the team. So we meet quarterly and we have strategies that we're working on countywide to improve readiness coming into kindergarten for all students. This ties in to the county executive's First Things First initiative for children 0 to 5. We are the education leg of her initiative. So, and there are other legs on her stool. That's just one leg. Lots of legs. So, so the way that team works is every meeting we have a data, either a data dip, data dive, or data dump, depending on how much and what the information is. And the idea is we start the meeting with the data. And everything that we do around the meeting is based upon what the data are telling us. And we only share aggregate data, countywide data, at that team level. One of our rules in data access with all the superintendents is that we will never share any information and we will never compare. We're never going to scorecard, we're never going to compare one organization to another because we want a cooperative, collaborative environment, not a competitive environment. As soon as you use the data against and compare and contrast, you establish a competitive environment, people are less likely to come to the table and work with each other. I lived in that world as a superintendent, and I could compete. Right? That's not what we want. We want all kids to be successful, not just some. So those rules we hold fast to, that we never compare, so we never list like all the schools at this meeting. We just share the aggregate data and then discuss what do we want to do about what the data are telling us. So from that, we develop strategies, and these are countywide strategies that we want to implement. And so in early childhood, we have 4 strategies now that we're working on. Some are very direct with early childhood providers. Some are with the professionals that are working in early childhood to strengthen the profession. And some are a public information campaign issues where we're trying to raise awareness about the importance of early childhood education. So we use those strategies, and since we have access to the data, and we can see it in real time, when we implement a strategy across the county or in certain areas, then SEI can immediately see if we're getting any movement with the students because we can see the student level data. So then we're able to connect, for example, early childhood outcomes with kindergarten readiness outcomes because we can follow the children from early childhood into their kindergartens and then on to 3rd grade. And so we can see if the strategies that were implemented 2 years ago with 3-year-olds are having an impact in kindergarten readiness 2 years later. So that's the work that we do. We also do validation studies for the organizations that work with kids in our county, and we try to do that for free when we can. Sometimes we have to charge a little bit to do it, but we're funded by philanthropy within the community. They support our work, and so we figure since philanthropy is supporting us that we should be giving back and supporting all those organizations that are serving kids. So when the Early Childhood Initiative of AMHA wants to know if the program, Parents as Teachers, is working for their children in Summit County, we're able to do that analysis and say, yes, it is. So that's what SEI does in this whole picture.
Good morning, I guess it still is. Good morning, everybody. I think you can probably get a sense of that I sit up here with some incredible partners at the table. And I'm known in our community for asking, what is our community going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? How are we creating the future? We all know that these are trying times and that systemic change is important. We also know that the kids are the future. And if they don't have well-balanced homes and safe places to live and an educational opportunities, and beyond that, the ability to get a job and earn a living and create a future for their kids, we are handicapping our future. So from our community, we put our big hats on and say, what is it going to take to be able to work together? What is the commitment from our community? And so as we look at it and we look forward to the future, this is one of the collaborations that is at the ground floor of making that difference over time. So we've done a lot of things in our community to address that systemic change, to align what we're doing. So we're talking about housing, we're talking about education, we're talking about workforce, we're talking about economic development, so that we are creating a future for our community. Today we're going to focus a little bit on what we call First Things First, which started several years ago when community partners came together to talk about alignment around early childhood education and what that takes. And you're going to see a laundry list of folks that have been working over several years together as a consortium. So think of this as part of a fabric that's woven together in our community. Everybody has a piece of that fabric that was working together to build something that is strong enough to hold the future for our kids. So these groups come together. The most recent strategic plan has come up with, I think, 4 different objectives. And you probably heard both Tony and Derran speak to a few of those as we're going. They're laced in here. So let me run over those. Early childhood education and childhood care and education. Family wellness. You heard about postpartum depression. What does that do to a young child that's home with a mom that isn't functioning well? So there's some goals and objectives around that. Professional development. You heard a little bit about that. And last of all, the coalition. How do you keep this vibrant and keep herding the cats, so to speak, to be able to keep it on focus? Well, that's a lot that comes out of the data. That's a lot that comes out of what our school systems are doing. That comes out a lot out of what our housing is. But we can't work as fractured units. So this coalition comes together and figures out where we're targeting so that we are in alignment and we can actually measure some of those outcomes as we go forward. So the group has come together. They put together a strategic plan, and all of those groups that you're looking at are all looking at that and saying, what are the strategies? I think they're up there on the board. You might not be able to read them, but what are the strategies? What are the tactics? And what are the goals and objectives that we want to group as a community working together to get there? Because everybody has a piece of a different color thread in that fabric that has to be woven together to get there. Am I telling you that this is easy work? No. But I'm telling you that in your communities, you probably have a lot of well-meaning early adopters who, if you ask them the right questions and set the right tone, will come to the table with the right kinds of attitudes. Now, we're not saying we have all of the answers, but as you heard before, the feds and the state have not been our friends. So we look at it and say, what is it at the local level that is within our power and on our mindset to be able to create the future that will enable us to be sustainable and forward-thinking? Does that make sense to everybody? So as we work together, one of the things that has come out of all of this is something called Summit for Kids. And I think we've done that for 8 years. It actually has 2 parts. One, the first part this year is on a Friday morning, and it is professional development. And this year's symposium is around opiates and how that affects our families, because we all know that this is a terrible problem in not only in our community, but across the country. What does that mean to the professionals that are working with these kids that come to school every day or live in a housing environment or wherever it is where they're dealing with a family that has drugs involved? And then Saturday, this is free of charge to the entire community. All of those folks, there's like 100 booths there, all focused on kids and their family and wellness, and it's all free. We expect 16,000 people there on that Saturday. And that's based on the historical attendance. So it's kind of wild, but it's also kind of fun, because they have things for the kids from Ronald McDonald House and superheroes dressed up and all that kind of stuff. But there's also testing, wellness testing. There is also screening for different things. Our children's hospital is there with all kinds of things for families to be prepared to take care of their kids as they go forward. Safety pieces, all of that to bring together. And I have to tell you, when you're in that facility and you see parents literally schlepping kids in, 2 and 3 kids behind them, and then all of a sudden the kids' faces light up and they're taking off to wherever it is they can. That to me says that there's hope in our community. But I have to tell you, all of these folks come to the table because all of these partners come to the table to do that because they know how important the future is. So not only is it a fun day for the kids, it's really cost effective, and it has a very, very positive outcome. The kid walks out with the screening, and the parents know what to do with that, because part of one of the other initiatives is to increase the well visits for the kids to their doctors. So I can't go into all of the alignment pieces, but that's how we try to develop it. Is it perfect? No. Does it get better every year? Absolutely. But as county executive, I can tell you this: I cannot do it without these folks who are the subject matter experts that do this every single day. David has a vision for Akron Public Schools. Derran has a vision for SEI and has made it a tremendous impact. Tony in the housing. And I could go on and on and on. But it takes leadership from your community to be able to kind of boldly go where no one's gone before. And your community will have to make that decision. We have limited time today. We are all proud and happy to discuss any of those things in detail with you. But we want you to know that Akron and Summit County intend to be a player for the long term, and we're going to build and use our local resources as best we can to get there. So thank you, Tony, for inviting me today.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm David James, and I hate being last. So Derran showed you a graphic of our kind of cradle to career continuum. So I'm burning the candle on the other end with our high school and post-secondary. I think in 2015, we talked about the Reach Opportunity Center partnership with Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority, where we've jointly constructed a facility where there's Head Start, there's adult training, and we have 2 kindergarten classrooms. And, after that collaboration, I began to think about some of the work that's been done here and listening to what's going on in Seattle and Tacoma and other places, and really thought about how can we reach more kids and how can we help them on that road to success. And so it was actually by accident, I saw an article about what was going on in Metropolitan Nashville schools with the Forward Education Foundation and Forward Next Generation Learning and their concept of career academies. And so working with the Forward Foundation folks, we're actually converting all of our high schools into what we're calling the College and Career Academies of Akron. And this is really what it's all about. It isn't so much about everybody doesn't need to go to college. We have partnered with the county, and some of the workforce data that we have received from our manufacturing network, they're telling us they'll take our kids out of high school with some initial training, and they can have living wage jobs. Our healthcare our healthcare industry is in dire need of people who are trained. So part of the Forward Next Generation Learning Network is this. We partner with a lot of different community agencies such as AMHA, such as SCI, the county, and then private business. We help kids do some career exploration. So in our version of it in the high school, we just initiated this at one of our high schools and we're rolling it out. They were the guinea pigs, so we're rolling it out to the rest. But during freshman year, they have what's called the Freshman Academy, which people in education are familiar with what that is. But in our version of it, we have these industry partners who are coming in and helping us and helping the kids explore those careers. And then in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, kids choose a career path. It doesn't mean that they're going to be, you know, a culinary artist or a mason, but we want them to explore it so they develop the requisite skills to be successful later, regardless of what they want to do. And so when kids choose that career path in our state, they'll take those series of 4 or more career technical courses, and it's going to be for every student. So every student will have to go through this, not just, you know, some islands of kids. And the reason for that is, as I've done this work for a while, we've noticed that, like our STEM school be a center of excellence, and it's because maybe the parents were more interested, so they got their kids to, take part in the lottery. But it's only serving about 450 kids, and we need to serve many more than that. And so our concept of these college and career academies is to have every student select a career pathway that they're going to go through. They still have to take all of their English, math, science, social studies. Kids who are in the visual and performing arts can still do that. Kids who are interested in engineering can still do that. But the one thing that's probably more to the core of what this meeting is about is the amazing partnerships that we've developed as part of this, and the people keep beating down my door, and that's what Tony was talking about. I'm having a hard time managing all these people, and they keep calling, wanting to adopt a school and wanting to get involved. So it's not just about the career piece, it's also about the mentoring, it's also about the scholarships, it's also about post-secondary. So we have a variety of businesses that are interested in coming in and working with our students and helping them get exposed to careers, helping them see what that's all about. We have had a long-standing relationship with 2-year college and 2 4-year colleges in our community, and all of our students, if they qualify, are eligible to take post-secondary classes while they're still in high school at our sites, not having to go anywhere. But I think all of this, in terms of AMHA, what will happen through our College and Career Academy piece is that we may have some kids come through that and actually work for AMHA or actually work for the county. And I think that's kind of the thing about helping people get on that road to financial stability. It's also helping us partner with other people. So United Way of Summit County is at the table. We're going to actually have them broker the relationships for us and getting some of these volunteers into the schools. Junior Achievement, I had about 20 of our top CEOs on their private planes, 2 private planes, go to Nashville for a day and visit. And I was like, this is unheard of. 5 years ago, this would have never happened because they would tell me to go fly a kite somewhere. But I think when you can, it's just like when we had the session yesterday about, the terminology of education. I'm not a former teacher, so don't hold that against me. But even I tell my folks, stop using all those acronyms, and particularly when we're talking to business people, you have to understand where they're coming from. They're looking for metrics and bottom line, which is why we're partnering with SCI, because they talk about metrics and the business people like that. And so all of this is really just trying to have opportunities for all of our kids so that when they come out of high school, they have a more concrete plan, and our whole community's been involved in developing them as, with those 21st century skills so they can be future leaders in our community no matter what they want to do. And I think whether they live in public housing or not, that's something that we need to have. At least those opportunities should be for all students.
Thank you to our panel. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of the coordination that we have in the Akron-Summit County area, and I think it's pretty clear that the leadership and vision that I talked about being such an essential ingredient to trying to and better trying to link housing and education is certainly prevalent in our hometown. We have time for a question or two. Any questions? Michael?
If I may. Sure. If you walked into our county executive's office seeking to solicit his or her interest in this kind of partnership, what's the first thing we should ask?
How that the county could help you make a difference in the outcomes of the lives of the people that we serve, given what you want to accomplish. What's the end result? Not, it's going to cost so much, it's going to happen to this. It's about, we are elected to serve the public, and tying that to a true outcome, a meaningful outcome to the work that you do is certainly something that would be the appeal to me, to listen. People come in with numbers and facts. You want to know those. But first you want to know what is it that will make a difference to the people that you're trying to touch while serving somebody. So I also talk about heart share and mind share. What is the heart share? And then you combine it with the mind share of what it takes to actually get it done and validate it. So.
Time for one more question? Yes.
Hi, I had a question about the data sharing or the data analysis of the summit education initiative. I'm not sure. I've got like all the
Derran.
podiums in my way. So from a housing authority perspective, you said that this summit education initiative kind of has access to the data at all of these schools, right?
Correct.
You guys are the keeper of the data.
Uh,
How does does Akron Housing Authority then access that, the data that they want through you all? Or, how does that data work? Because I can believe, having done this similar work in Fresno, that the schools would be comfortable with an education initiative kind of accessing and sharing the data, but they're not as comfortable with the housing authority accessing and sharing the data because we don't know what they know, which is totally understandable. So can you explain how you guys benefit the us housers?
Yes. I'll come over here. How's that? Sure. We don't house the data. The first thing is we only access it. So what would happen, the data access agreements are 2 layers. There's this general data access agreement that the superintendents hopefully sign every January that just says, okay, we'll do this another year, we trust you. I mean, it's a legal document, it's like 10 pages long, and it really defines how we will behave. But in that is what we have another document that's called a project authorization. So for example, if AMHA or the Boys and Girls Club or a school district itself wanted us to research or access specific data, we would fill out this project authorization. And we would send it to the superintendent or the designee and say, AMHA is interested in us analyzing their children who participated in the Early Childhood Initiative and following them into kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And we are going to access these data points. We're going to access school attended, test scores, grades, depending on the age of the kids, GPA, whatever those metrics might be that are commonly collected within the school district already. The superintendent or a designee, in David's case, he is a designee that signs it, would sign that and say, yes, that's okay. And there's a term to that. We're going to do this over the next 9 months. We're going to do this over the next 2 years. Right? And so then once we get that project authorization, then we do the work. But within that project authorization, it says we're doing this on behalf of the Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority for this specific purpose.
So then that would prevent, or that would then, Tony wouldn't have to go have data agreements with all the school districts. He goes to you and says, hey, we need this done, and
Right.
either pays you for it or you do it because that's what you
Well, yeah.
need to do.
Right.
And
It's the latter.
gives
Yeah.
all the information.
Single source, maybe.
Single source. It also eliminates.
Can you come to
We actually talked with the folks in Fresno.
Separately wrote to our CDC person.
Yeah. It also takes a big burden off the school district. Because, I mean, you imagine the AMHA wants information, the Boys and Girls Club, they want to know, Big Brothers and Business, everybody wants to know if what they're doing matters. And so this now allows David to say, go talk to SEI. And then, you know, we broker that.
So the data that the PHA or the Boys and Girls Club receive the entire school district data, or do they specify we need, like, you said, oh, this grade level, or, so I'm just clarifying, what data do you get with that request?
It really is up to the requester and the school district to agree to that. So, you know, we're not going to, like, there are certain things that we do not access, like health records, special education records, things like that we don't access. Right? But gender, ethnicity, those types of things, we don't access socioeconomic data. Basically, it's test scores, GPA, attendance, grade point averages, things like that, state test scores versus local, nationally normed formative assessments that school districts use, and for a defined audience. And maybe they wanted to compare how well did the kids in the Metropolitan Housing Authority do in third grade reading that participated in the ECI compared to other kids in this school, in the district, in the county. We can do that, but in order for us to do that, he has to okay that. Right? Because once we start doing the comparison thing, then it gets dicey, and we're not going to break that rule unless he allows us to break that rule, which he's done a couple times. So
I'm getting the signal from our rule keeper here that we've used our allotted time and we won't be around the rest of the day, so please feel free to follow up with us individually. Thank you.
Okay, just thank you again to that panel for a fantastic session. A reminder that we do actually have a data sharing panel this afternoon, so you will get another bite at that apple. Footnote, in Chicago, there's another version of this intermediary role with Chapin Hall that those of you who were here last year may recall for extra points, but also worth looking at. So our next panel should please come on up. We're now going to shift to a state and regional level for conversation, and we have colleagues coming from Minneapolis and also from the Pacific Northwest, and I think we have Kim Miner to moderate, so please come on up, and Kim will grab the mic in a moment. Thanks.